Your very first step for creating a high ponytail is going to be to section off the perimeter of your hair. You want to section off enough hair around your entire head to make sure that you're able to cover your tracks that will be around the perimeter. This is about an inch to an inch and a half in the back that I've left out to cover the perimeter track of the hair. And this is very, very important because in order to have a perfect high ponytail that's flat with no track showing, you have to leave out enough hair to cover the tracks. And I'm also leaving out 3 fingers width of leave out because we're going to do a side part for this particular install. And you can see this area that's braided around the perimeter is the hair that I'm leaving out for the ponytail. And the hair that's left out on top is what's going to be left out to cover the tracks around the part. Now on to the braid pattern. So for the braid pattern, I'm doing 2 perimeter braids. The first braid is going to start on one side and I'm braiding around the back, and then I'm going to end the braid at the back of the head on the opposite side. Now I'm starting a braid on the other side of the head right next to the leave out, and what I'm going to do at this point right behind the ear, I'm going to grab the tail end of the first braid that I did and I'm going to pull it taut and add it to the braid that I'm currently working on. And I'm going to go ahead and continue this braid holding the tail of that other braid in, and I'm going to braid around to the opposite side of the head and stop at that point and then braid it all the way down and leave that tail hanging as well. And you can see where I'm braiding now that the portion of that braid that I pulled into the tail is absolutely flat. You don't want to pull it too tight, but you do want to pull it tight enough so that you're not getting any lift and it's not loose. Now I'm going to start doing my braids straight back. I'm moving back onto the other side of the head, and I'm going to start from the front of the head and begin another braid going straight back. And once I get about halfway down with this braid, I'm going to go ahead and take the tail end of the second braid that I did that's hanging, and I'm going to pull that on the inside of the braid that I'm currently working on, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it tight and add it to the hair in the braid that I'm currently working on, and then I'm going to go ahead and continue braiding that braid all the way down and leave the tail of that braid hanging. And I'm going to go ahead and continue in this manner doing the braids straight back, but this time instead of switching from side to side, I'm going to stay on the same side and just continue working towards the opposite direction, taking the tail of each braid and adding it into the next braid. And you can see the pattern that I used here. This pattern is actually a little different than the pattern you should probably use. You're going to want to make your braids a little thinner and smaller, and of course a little neater. The person I'm working on here, her hair is actually thinned out a little bit due to other styling methods, so I had to do the braids a little different. And once you're all done, you'll have one braid left, and what I do is I wrap that in between uh, the last perimeter braid that I have and then the other braids that are going straight back, and just sew it in. And the first track that I'm going to sew on is the perimeter track. I'm sewing this weft under the first perimeter braid that goes around, and I'm sewing it in from temple to temple. So what I do, I push the track underneath the braid, and then I take my needle and I insert it under the braid. I want it all the way around the braid, and then I bring it underneath the track while I'm holding the track under the braid. Hopefully that will make sense for you guys, but I'm trying to show you the best I can. So again, I'm pushing the track or the weft underneath the braid and holding it in place under the braid while I sew the weft onto the braid. And I'm sewing through the braid, all the way around the braid. And as you can see, I do this for the first row as well as for the second row. They're both sewn under the braid. And the second row, I actually, once I get to the front, I do not sew under the braid, only in the back, because this is the part we're most concerned about in the case of a high ponytail. And you can see that I bring the tracks all the way up to the temple on both sides. And now I'm going to show you how I fold the wefts, because from the point of the second row I go ahead and start going horizontally and I fold the wefts. You want to tack down the end of your row, the end of the weft, at least with 2 stitches at the very end, and you want to make those stitches very, very secure. And your next step is going to be to fold the weft over. You're going to fold it over so that the weft sits where you want your next row to start. So it should be above the last row that you sewed. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm holding this weft in place at the fold while I get ready to stitch. And I'm going to stitch at the fold, but I'm not just stitching the top of the weft, I'm stitching through both layers. So where the fold is, I'm stitching through the top of the fold and the bottom of the fold. And I'm going to make at least 2 or 3 very secure stitches right there on the edge of that fold to hold it in place. And once those stitches are in place, that fold should actually lay very, very flat. And I'm sewing around the weft, never through it. Once I get the edge of the fold reinforced, then I'm going to go ahead and start stitching the rest of the track, and I'm going to stitch it in the direction that I would normally stitch, because now I'm starting my next row of hair, which I'm going horizontally. And I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same process on the other side for folding the weft. Do it the same way. You're going to do at least 2 stitches at the edge of your fold to reinforce before you fold over. And that's just to hold the weft in place so that the fold lays flat. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold the weft over, and so that the weft sits above the row that I just finished sewing. I'm holding the weft in place at the fold while I stitch, and I'm going to do at least 2 stitches around the top and bottom of the fold, sewing around the weft. I'm going to make sure that these stitches are very, very secure so that the weft lays flat, and I'm also ensuring to sew completely around the braid and not through the braid, so that the strands of hair don't break while I'm sewing and it doesn't cause too much tension. Once I have the edge of the fold reinforced, then I'm going to go ahead and continue sewing my track in on my next row. And here are some pictures of the track placement. The first 2 rows that I sew on are the perimeter rows that go from temple to temple under the braid, and the rest of my rows are actually going to go horizontally from side to side, folding the wefts whenever possible. Once I make it to the top, I usually measure by my fingers. I'll usually have about 3 finger spaces on each side of the leave out. I'll sew horizontally until I have 3 finger spaces on the back of the leave out, and then I start to sew in a U shape all the way up until the edge of the horseshoe. The second track that I sew in, I sew under the braid, and the last track I sew on top of the braid so that there's no braid showing, which makes the track a lot easier to cover with the leave out. And you can see the back track, how once you flip it up it lays flat. Once I finish sewing everything in, I'll go back in and add wefts in any spaces that need to be filled in where I feel that the gaps are too large or the tracks aren't covered as well as I would like them to be. And now here's our finished product, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how flat our high ponytail is. Go ahead and just brush it up, and you see there are no bumps in the back, there are no bumps on the side, there's enough hair that was left out to cover the tracks, and so now here we have a perfect high ponytail install. And I'm going to go ahead and leave you all with some photos of this lovely high ponytail install. You get a fabulous high ponytail as well as a beautiful outcome when you wear the hair down as well. And you have tons of styling options with this braid pattern as well as with this track placement.